did Raja Ram Mohan Roy convert himself to Christianity? In responding to this, we again go back to the contemporary sources, which included the Raja's Indian companions on his voyage to England, and get to know that the Raja took along a Brahmin cook by the name of Ramratna Mukhopadhyay and a milk cow with him. And you can understand for what reasons. From the same contemporary sources, again counting in the Indian companions and servants of the Raja in England, we get to know that till his last breath, he donned the sacred thread, Yagyompavita or Janeyu, and when he breathed his last, he was reportedly doing the japa of the Gayatri mantra and the name of Brahman. He breathed his last through such nama japa or chanting of the sacred names of Gayatri and Brahman. Here, some people like to point to the fact that the Raja was not cremated but buried in a cemetery in Bristol, England. Those who make that argument are either ignorant of or are mischievously misleading their audience of the historical background related to cremation in the UK and of the kinds of burial the deceased could be given. In 1831, it took the Raja Ram Mohan Roy and his party about 5 months, 4 months and 27 days to be precise, to reach Liverpool, England from Calcutta. 12 years later, when his friend and patron, Prince Dwarkanath Tagore, left for England from Calcutta, it took him exactly 5 months to reach his destination. Therefore, it is evident that in that era, it took about 5 months to travel between England and India. Accordingly, it was out of question for the Raja's remains to be sent back from England to India for a timely, proper Hindu cremation and according it, the last rites. The first crematorium for public use in Great Britain was built and operated in the year 1885, 52 years after the Raja's passing, in Woking, Surrey, by the Cremation Society. This was an organization, a not-for-profit charitable organization, established in the year 1874, 41 years after the Raja's passing. The Cremation Society itself was a result of Queen Victoria's surgeon, Sir Henry Thompson, FRCS, witnessing the Italian inventor, Professor Brunetti's cremation apparatus in a demonstration that the professor gave at the Vienna Exposition of 1873. Thereafter, the society was created by Sir Henry and his associates for the advocacy of cremation in Great Britain. Before the society's public crematorium came into operational use, we get to know that in the year 1882, one Captain Hanham of Blandford, Dorset, had requested the society to carry out the cremations of 2 deceased members of his family. The society could not carry out, unfortunately, his wishes due to the objections of the Home Office of the UK. The captain then privately cremated the remains of his deceased mother and wife by erecting a crematorium on his own estate. And subsequently, upon his own death, about a year later, in 1883, the captain himself was cremated there. This happened at a time when the awareness of cremation as a valid, efficient, and sanitary way of disposing the remains of the deceased had spread considerably thanks to the Cremation Society's relentless campaigns. Yet, this was as long as 50 years after the Raja's demise. Therefore, in 1833, the year of the Raja's passing, there was neither any provision nor any facilities for cremating the deceased, much less for a full-scale Hindu cremation with all its attendant rituals. On top of that, there was a strong prejudice against carrying out cremation of any kind due to the prevailing Christian religious customs and dogma. So the question of providing cremation facilities to a foreigner, a Hindu at that, by any means whatsoever in 1833, whether public or private, does not arise. The only available option for the Raja was burial, and the Raja was painfully aware of this practical condition of his impending death, which is why he had requested his English friends as well as his Indian companions to at least ensure that his remains would not be buried on any Christian burial ground or Christian cemetery. He was aware that many in England and back home in Calcutta, India, were eager to prove him Christian, as many in contemporary India are trying to do as well, for their own individual vested interests of varying kinds. His family in India, the Raja's family in India, especially his stepbrothers, had already launched legal battles to disinherit him and his heirs from the ancestral property and other inheritance. The Raja knew that they would declare him a Christian if his body were to be buried in lieu of a proper cremation in a Christian cemetery by taking and citing it as a sure sign of conversion, and thus disinherit his heirs on that particular ground. For this reason, the Raja's mortal remains were buried in a secluded spot located in the garden which was adjacent to his Bristol residence and the place of his passing, which is the Beach House, the home of his friend and Unitarian minister, Land Carpenter. It was only in 1843, 10 years after the Raja's passing, that his dear friend and patron, Prince Dwarkanath Tagore, who was a Vaishnavite himself and was visiting England at that time, made arrangements for transporting the Raja's remains to the fashionable Arnos Vale Cemetery in Arnos Vale, Bristol. Prince Dwarkanath, because he was very fond of the Raja and he was the main patron throughout the Raja's Calcutta life, he did not want Raja's remains to be left in an obscure manner in some place tucked away in Bristol. He wanted it to be placed in a prominent place. So Prince Dwarkanath then commissioned an architect to build a dignified cenotaph that would resemble a Hindu temple. This is to be noted. It should be pointed out that the Arnos Vale Cemetery was not located on a churchyard, and it did not belong to any church. It was simply a stately, fashionable place of burial designed after a Greek necropolis, which has elaborate tombs, characteristic of the Greek burial mounds, and elaborate monuments of other kinds, where the most distinguished dead of Bristol, England, would find a resting place. Therefore, Prince Dwarkanath did not act in contravention of the Raja's wishes that he must not be buried in a churchyard or Christian burial ground by burying the Raja's remains there, that is in the Arnos Vale Cemetery. Another point of importance in this regard is that the Arnos Vale Cemetery was established in 1837, that is 4 years after the Raja had passed away. And the first burial in that cemetery was in 1839, that is 5 years after the Raja's passing. Therefore, the Raja's remains could not have been buried at Arnos Vale Cemetery at the time of his death, simply because the cemetery did not exist at that time. So Arnos Vale Cemetery was not a Christian burial ground. It's not located in a churchyard. And therefore, the accusation that the Raja had converted to Christianity, and that's why he had to be buried in a churchyard, in a cemetery, is invalid. As a matter of fact, let me give you some context here so that you can appreciate the challenges for the Raja's mortal remains to be disposed of in a proper manner at the time of his passing. As a matter of fact, the first time that a Hindu individual was ever permitted to hold a proper open-air Hindu cremation as per traditional customs was as recent as in 2010. And it was as recent as in 2021, when for the very first time, the Hindus got permission from UK authorities to establish their own purpose-built crematorium. So only 2 years back, the Hindus got their very own purpose-built crematorium built on the soil of UK. And only about 10 years ago, a decade ago, the first open-air Hindu cremation, the proper Hindu cremation on private initiative was permitted. That was the year 2010. Raja Ram Mohan Roy's Diksha, now another important aspect regarding his religion or religious practices that he followed. Raja Ram Mohan Roy's Diksha, or formal initiation into sadhana or spiritual pursuits, and his Diksha Guru would throw a lot of light on the kind of religious opinions and religious practices that he followed. Swami Hariharananda Tirtha, a great tantrika from the late 18th century, was Raja Ram Mohan Roy's guru, and it was he, that is Swami Hariharananda Tirtha, who gave mantra diksha, or formal initiation into tantra sadhana, to Raja Ram Mohan Roy. The Raja helped his guru, like a good and obedient disciple, a shishya. The Raja helped his guru to prepare an authoritative commentary on the Mahanirvana Tantra. Ramchandra Vidyavagish, Swami Hariharananda Tirtha's younger brother, was a great scholar of Sanskrit and Vedanta in his own right. He taught at the Vedanta college established by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and later at the Sanskrit college also. Vidyavagish had been a friend and collaborator of Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and later of Maharishi Devendranath also. Raja Ram Mohan Roy had in fact appointed him as the very first Acharya, as well as the first secretary of the Brahmo Samaj, when the organization began functioning in the year 1828. So you can get an idea of the kind of people, traditional Sanskrit Pandits and traditional gurus, tantrikas, who gave Raja Ram Mohan Roy the initial impetus and the spiritual capital in order to go ahead and start a spiritual pursuit for his own individual private purposes, as well as for the society, which he did by establishing the Brahmo Samaj. Now, this is a picture of the mausoleum or the cenotaph that Prince Dwarkanath Tagore had built for his beloved friend, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, from the Arnos Cemetery, Bristol, England. You can notice this particular cenotaph, which looks like a Hindu temple.